The screaming started at 0600 ship time. It wasn't the dignified shriek of an alarm or the solemn chime of a warning system. No, it was a throaty, gurgling wail that bounced off the titanium corridor walls of the interspecies research vessel Korellian Sway. The noise came from a crew member, a Zelvonian biologist named Trillix, who had just entered the medical bay and discovered something that, to his species, was about as horrifying as a breached hull. Lying on Biobed 3 was a Terran, and he was sweating. Trillix backed away, claws twitching. He is excreting fluids. From his face, he whispered into his comm, Commander Nulo, the human is leaking. A few seconds later, the medical bay doors hissed open again, and Commander Nulo entered with the caution of a diplomat approaching an unstable minefield. He was tall, cerulean-skinned, and his 4 eyes blinked independently as he examined the groaning figure on the bed. The human's name was Perrin Oslow. He was the only Terran aboard the Korellian Sway, a cultural exchange officer tasked with observing alien societal norms and offering Terran equivalents. He was also the ship's recreational activities coordinator, which mostly meant he organized movie night and had once tried to get the crew to play charades. It hadn't gone well. Right now, Perrin looked like he'd been drained of color. His skin was pale, his hair matted to his forehead, and he was covered in a sheen of sweat that glistened under the sterile lights. He shifted, groaned, and muttered something unintelligible. Trillix was still backed into the corner, his data tablet forgotten on the floor. Nulo turned to the on-duty medic, a small, translucent-skinned being called Fex. "Status?" Fex's voice bubbled with unease. Elevated body temperature, accelerated heart rate, and prolonged unconsciousness. "I believe the Terran is dying." "I'm not dying," Perrin croaked suddenly, eyes cracking open. "I just have a fever." All 3 aliens recoiled. "Fever?" Nulo repeated as if the word itself was an accusation. Perrin peeled an arm off his chest and waved vaguely. "Yeah, you know, infection or something. Body's fighting it. Heat's part of the process. Nothing to freak out about." Trillix let out a strangled noise and retreated further into the corner. Fex took a hesitant step forward. "But your core temperature is nearly 40 degrees Celsius. That would kill a Threxian." "Well, I'm not a Threxian," Perrin replied, coughing into his sleeve. "I just need some sleep." "You're certain?" Nulo asked, glancing at the readouts flickering above the bed. "You were leaking from multiple orifices." "Yeah," Perrin muttered, eyes already closing again. "That's kinda normal. Just let me rest." And with that, he drifted off again, leaving the 3 aliens frozen in a triad of silent horror. The fever became a ship-wide emergency. Within 2 hours, the Korellian Sway's entire medical database had been scanned for Terran fever. The results were both enlightening and deeply unsettling for the crew, especially when they discovered that the condition was not only common, but also considered mild in many cases. The fact that humans regularly endured such violent internal heat fluctuations without immediate medical intervention was, to most of the species aboard, nothing short of madness. Commander Nulo convened an emergency meeting in the observation chamber. Only senior officers were present, including Trillix, Fex, and the ship's engineer, a broad-shouldered insectoid named Velner, who'd once welded a hull breach during a meteor shower without a pressurized suit. Even Velner looked nervous. "We must consider containment," Trillix said. "We don't know how this fever spreads. Could be airborne." "Perrin said it was an infection," Nulo replied. "Then it is a pathogen," Fex added. "Potentially zoonotic. We must isolate him. Perhaps jettison his quarters." "Jettison? Are you insane?" Velner buzzed. "He's not dead. Yet," Trillix muttered. Nulo raised a hand. "Enough. No one is being jettisoned. But we must proceed cautiously. No physical contact. Full environmental suits if you must approach his quarters. Fex, monitor him remotely. If his condition worsens, we'll consider requesting a Terran medical specialist." "I'm fine," Perrin said from the doorway. Everyone turned. He was still pale, still sweating, but upright and leaning against the wall like it was doing most of the work. His uniform shirt was half undone, revealing a damp undershirt beneath. His eyes were glassy but alert. "You walked?" Fex asked, horrified. "Yeah," Perrin said. "I needed water. Didn't see a nurse bot. Just figured I'd get it myself." "You have a core temperature above 39 degrees, Trilix hissed. "You should be unconscious." "I slept for 6 hours. Fever's breaking a bit. I'll be okay." "No, you are not okay," Nolo said. "We do not understand what your body is doing. Your biology is chaotic." Perrin gave a weak grin. "Yeah, welcome to humanity." The next 48 hours were a whirlwind of confusion, fear, and reluctant awe. Perrin's condition fluctuated. His temperature would spike, then drop. He sweated through 3 uniforms. At one point, he got up to use the bathroom and collapsed in the corridor, prompting a full lockdown of medbay. It took Fex 2 hours to coax him back to bed, during which time Trilix initiated a Level 2 biocontainment protocol, which hadn't been used since the fungal outbreak on Telner 6. Despite all this, Perrin remained frustratingly calm. He groaned and cursed and muttered about headaches, but whenever anyone asked how he was, he gave the same answer. "I just need some sleep." By the 3rd day, the fever began to subside. Perrin's skin regained color, and he was able to sit up without assistance. He even requested a cup of tea, which sent Fex into a silent panic until it was confirmed that he meant actual tea, not a Terran code for medical intervention. When he finally stood on his own and walked the length of medbay unaided, Trilix stared at him as if he were some mythical beast. "You recovered," the biologist said. "Yeah," Perrin replied. "Told you it was just a fever. But your body temperature was lethal. Your organs should have failed." "Well, good thing they didn't." Fex stepped forward, tablet in hand. "We have compiled a report on your illness. It will be submitted to the Galactic Medical Consortium." "Oh good," Perrin said, stretching. "Can't wait to be famous for sweating a lot." The next day, Commander Nulo called him into the observation chamber again. Perrin arrived wearing a fresh uniform, hair still damp from a long shower. He felt human again, tired but alive. Nulo gestured to the central table. "Please, sit." Perrin did. "We have questions," Nulo said. "About your species." "Okay. Is it true," Nulo began, "that your kind routinely endure fevers without formal medical assistance?" "Yeah. Unless it gets too bad, we usually just hydrate, sleep, and wait it out. And this is safe." "Not always," Perrin admitted. "But we've built up tolerance over time. Our immune systems are aggressive. Sometimes too aggressive." Trilix tapped a claw against the table. "And you do not consider this dangerous?" "Sure, it's dangerous. But so is walking outside in winter without a coat. We just adapt." The room fell silent. Velner stared at him like he was a weapon. Nulo leaned forward. "Terran biology is unpredictable. Violent. But tenacious." "I guess," Perrin said. "We have decided to keep you aboard." "Oh, thanks. But if you ever leak again," Trilix warned, "we're putting you in a containment pod." Perrin raised his hands. "Fair enough." By the 4th day, Perrin was back in the galley, hunched over a steaming bowl of something the nutrition synthesizer insisted was neutral porridge. It tasted like wet lint, but it was warm and didn't require chewing, which suited his still aching jaw. Every few minutes he paused to blow his nose into a disposable cloth, which he then folded and placed beside his tray. He was alone, until the door iris spiraled open and someone stepped in with a series of soft, clicking footfalls. "Is it true you expelled mucus from your nasal system during the fever?" asked the newcomer without preamble. Perrin didn't look up. "Still do," he said around a spoonful. "You must be new." The alien was tall and narrow, with skin the shade of rusted copper and limbs that seemed to articulate in unnatural directions. Its name tag read DR. Sinvalorth Behavioral Sciences. The DR part was underlined as if that somehow added credibility. "I arrived while you were unconscious," Valorth said. "I observed the footage." "You watched me sleep?" "I studied your recovery. It was anomalous." Perrin gestured to the seat across from him. Well, you're in for more anomalies. Welcome aboard. Valorth sat, folding its legs beneath like a mantis. It kept its gaze fixed on Perrin's flushed face. Your species treats illness with inactivity, Valorth said slowly. Instead of seeking environmental recalibration, you enter a dormant state, like a wounded prey animal. We call it rest, Perrin said. It's kind of our thing. Valorth tilted its head. But you lacked external intervention. No cryostasis. No regenerative serum. You simply boiled internally and waited. Pretty much. That is statistically reckless. Perrin shrugged. We don't really do things by the numbers. We do what works. Valorth's fingers twitched. You understand this makes you a hazard. Your species' ability to endure internal combustion without panicking presents a significant interpretive challenge. Tell me about it, Perrin muttered. You ever try explaining chickenpox to a Threxian? I had to draw diagrams. Valorth leaned forward. You willingly host hostile agents within your own tissue. Sometimes they don't ask permission. And you accept this? Not like we throw parties for them, Perrin said. But yeah, we deal. Valorth was silent for a moment. Then, in a tone that was almost reverent, you allow your own biology to test you. Perrin nodded, tugging his collar to fan his neck. That's one way to put it. You are under constant threat, Valorth continued. Yet you carry on as if the threat is irrelevant. It's not irrelevant. We just don't let it stop us. Valorth sat back. Fascinating. Perrin raised an eyebrow. You're not going to try to dissect me, are you? Only mentally. That's somehow worse. Valorth tapped a claw against the table. We have war species in the consortium. Beings bred for conflict, for survival under extreme duress. None of them tolerate internal dysfunction with such casual disregard. Perrin spooned more porridge into his mouth. Yeah, well, we're not bred for anything. We just show up and figure it out. That night, someone left a cooling unit outside Perrin's quarters. It was the size of a small crate and adorned with a hand-labeled tag that read for face leaking. He didn't ask questions. The next ship cycle brought another surprise in the form of a formal request delivered via comm terminal. He squinted at the message. A presentation? Vellner's voice buzzed through the speaker. For the junior xenobiology interns. They have questions. About your resilience. Perrin rubbed his temples. I'm not a medical manual. They consider you a living anomaly. Also, Trilix refuses to speak to them. Why? He says they're judgmental. Fine, Perrin sighed. What time? 1700. The room was a lecture chamber, though it bore a closer resemblance to a planetarium invaded by furniture. The walls glowed with soft bioluminescence, and spherical chairs hovered at varying heights. Perrin stood at the center, awkwardly adjusting a headset that didn't quite fit his ears. The interns arrived in clusters, each more visually disconcerting than the last. One species resembled walking kelp, another moved via undulating fins. A few blinked at him with translucent eyelids, others recorded him using eye-mounted lenses that whirred quietly. He cleared his throat. Hi, I'm Perrin. I'm the human. There was a ripple of clicks, chirps, and what might have been polite coughing. I hear you have questions. A floating jellyfish raised a tentacle. Why did your dermal layers not rupture? Perrin blinked. What? During your thermal spike. Oh. Skin's pretty elastic. It holds. A spherical being with rows of tiny mouthlets chimed in. But your cells were overheating. Yeah, Perrin said. It happens. We sweat to cool down. Voluntary fluid loss? Asked a coral-skinned quadruped. To regulate internal conditions? Exactly. There was a long silence. Then the kelp being spoke. That is inefficient. Perrin shrugged. Welcome to Earth. The mouthlet creature tilted forward. Your body enters a state of dysfunction and your answer is to sleep through it? Not always, Perrin said. Sometimes we work through it. Depends on the situation. Even while compromised? Ever heard of retail? Perrin muttered. What is retail? Asked the jellyfish. Nothing good, he said. Look, you're all thinking of illness like it's a failure. We don't. It's just part of being alive. Another silence. Then the kelp being asked, and you do not fear it? Perrin hesitated. Of course we do. But fear's not a stop sign. It's more like a caution light. At the end of the session, most of the interns floated away in contemplative silence. A few hovered near the exit, trading quiet, rapid-fire notes in their own frequencies. Perrin stood for a moment before tugging off the headset and trudging out. Less than 2 hours later, he found himself summoned to engineering. The compartment was hot and smelled faintly of metallic ozone. Vellner was perched on the upper gantry welding something large and unpleasant-looking. "You need me," Perrin called. "Climb." Perrin groaned but scaled the ladder. At the top, Vellner handed him a heat shield and pointed toward a humming coil. "Stand there. Block the sparks." "You don't have a drone for this?" "I have you." As Vellner resumed welding, bits of superheated slag pinged off the shield. Perrin squinted through the haze. "So, what's the real reason I'm here?" Vellner didn't look up. "You recovered from a fever without aid. I want to see how you handle actual stress. This isn't a test. It is now." Perrin gritted his teeth. "You know I'm still technically recovering." "Exactly." The repair took nearly 40 minutes. By the end, Perrin's arms were aching and his shirt clung to his back. Vellner finally powered down the torch and examined the weld with a critical eye. "You didn't complain." "I'm too tired to," Perrin muttered. "You remain functional." "Barely." Vellner made a sound like a saw blade clearing its throat. "You continue to confound expectations." "That's kind of my thing." Perrin climbed down the ladder, legs shaking. As he reached the floor, he glanced over his shoulder. "Next time you want to observe human stress response, try Monopoly." "Is that a weapon?" "Worse." By the end of the week, Perrin was back to his usual duties. He reinstated movie night, though attendance was notably higher than before. Several crew members brought notepads. One tried to measure his pulse during the opening credits. He let them. After the screening, Valorth approached him near the snack dispensers. "I have submitted a paper," the alien said. "Congrats." "On you." Perrin paused. "Really?" "I have titled it The Paradox of Terran Fragility, a Study in Contradictions." "That's flattering. It includes an appendix on your sweat." "Of course it does." Valorth hesitated. "I wish to observe a more severe condition next time. Perhaps organ failure." Perrin held up both hands. "Let's not get ahead of ourselves." Valorth's eyes gleamed. "We will be watching." Perrin grabbed a handful of gelatin cubes from the dispenser and walked away. He was beginning to miss being underestimated. 3 days after the fever incident, Perrin was invited, though summoned was probably the better term, into the Korellian Sway's hydroponics bay. A place he had previously only visited to retrieve mint leaves for what he swore was tea but had resulted in a 15-page incident report. This time, however, he had been asked to come for a functional assessment. He wasn't entirely sure what that meant, but he was pretty sure it was going to involve plants and suspicion. The first thing he noticed when the bay doors opened was the smell, something sharp and unfamiliar, like licorice soaked in ammonia. The second thing was the pair of crew members waiting for him. One was Murix, an agronomic systems specialist who resembled a walking bundle of multicolored reeds. The other was someone new, a squat, ridged creature with a mouth like a cracked geode and skin that shimmered with shifting oil-slick colors. "You're the human," the new one said, its voice vibrating from somewhere within its throat cavity. Perrin stepped cautiously into the room. "Depends who's asking." "I am Glor. My species does not get fevers. We calcify." Perrin blinked. "Sounds crunchy." Murix rustled gently and gestured toward a tray of potted seedlings. "We are conducting a resilience calibration. We wish to determine what physiological stimuli cause adverse reactions in your species, without inducing another episode." Perrin crossed his arms. "You want to see what makes me sick?" "Precisely," Glor said. "But safely." That's what the last dentist I had said right before I blacked out and woke up with a temporary crown made of industrial epoxy. Murix's reeds twitched. "That sounds unregulated." "You have no idea." They led him to a bench where several objects were arranged in a neat line. Perrin eyed them. One looked like a chunk of dried sea sponge. Another gave off a faint buzzing sound. There was also a cube of something translucent that glowed faintly yellow. Murix indicated the items with a vine-like appendage. "Ingestion is not required. We will begin with olfactory exposure." Glor approached holding a small, lidless container. "This is a volatile secretion from the Relenthian root bulb. It induces temporary disorientation in core species. Perrin leaned forward, took a cautious sniff, and recoiled. That smells like a gym sock left in a swamp. What is your internal response? My dignity is trying to climb out of my nose. Murex scribbled something on a pad. Noted. Psychological rejection. No vomiting. They moved on. The next item was a folded sheet of biofilm that vibrated faintly when touched. This produces low-frequency vibrations, Glor said. It disrupts reproductive cycles in Zarnath larvae. Perrin placed a hand on it. After a few seconds, he grimaced. Feels like I'm holding a speaker playing dubstep through a wet towel. Pain? No. Just deeply unpleasant. Like being judged by a bassline. Glor lowered the biofilm. You are uncooperative with standard metrics. I've been told that before. They continued for over an hour. Perrin endured exposure to a compound that made his eyes water uncontrollably, but he insisted was just spicy air, a tactile stimulus that caused his skin to tingle for 20 minutes. And a visual pattern that induced nausea in over half known species. He described it as a screensaver from a haunted printer. At the end of the trial, Glor stepped back and stared at him. You are exhibiting minimal physiological strain, Glor said. Yet your verbal reactions imply distress. Yeah, well, Perrin replied, rubbing his temples. Humans are kind of professional complainers. It's cultural. We shout at problems until they either go away or someone gives us a discount. Murex lowered its pad. Remarkably inefficient. Welcome to Earth. They let him go shortly after. As he exited the hydroponics bay, he passed a maintenance drone that paused in its work to beep at him. He nodded solemnly back. At this point, he wasn't sure if the machines were curious or worried. Later that afternoon, he found himself in the galley again, this time trying to coax something resembling toast from the synthesizer. A small crowd began to gather, led by an Andari linguist named Telk, whose translucent chest housed a slow-pulsing biolight that dimmed and brightened with mood. We have a request, Telk said, placing a small data slate on the table. Perrin glanced at it. You want me to do what? Simulate an Earth employment environment, Telk said. We require a controlled stress scenario that reflects your species' baseline. You want me to pretend I'm back at a job on Earth? Telk pulsed a soft green. Yes. To observe your performance under expected duress. You're trying to stress me out on purpose. Yes. Perrin sighed. Fine. But I'm doing retail. And I'm not pretending to be cheerful. The simulation was set up in one of the ship's unused storage bays. They recreated a storefront using crates, artificial lighting, and a cash register that was absolutely a repurposed diagnostic console. Perrin stood behind the counter wearing a hastily fabricated apron with the words "Welcome Associate" printed in garbled High Korellian. The customers were volunteers aliens from various departments briefed to act the part. The first was a towering quadruped who knocked over half the display trying to examine a pair of non-existent shoes. Perrin helped it right the crates, apologized for something that wasn't his fault, and gave it a voucher for a future discount. The second customer spoke only in a tonal language that none of the translation implants could decode. Perrin nodded politely through the entire interaction, then handed it a receipt and said, "Have a nice day," in a voice devoid of feeling. By the fifth customer, an overeager Glor demanding to return a defective snack cube, without a receipt, Perrin had developed a 1,000-yard stare. This isn't even the worst job I've had, he muttered. Telk, watching from a corner, recorded everything. Eventually, the simulation ended. Telk approached him. You displayed signs of irritation but maintained protocol. That's retail. You offered no direct aggression. That's how you get written up. You endured multiple linguistic and logical mismatches without escalation. That's just a Tuesday. Telk's glow deepened. Your species tolerates confusion and inefficiency with remarkable compliance. Perrin slipped off the apron. We call it customer service. He left them to their data. By the following day, word had spread. He was no longer treated as a curiosity but as a sort of cautionary fable. Crew whispered about the Terran who survived his own body and a simulated shift with equal apathy. Fex installed a hydration station outside his quarters. Trilix sent him a thermal blanket with a note that simply read, "In case you spontaneously combust again." In the evening, Nulo invited him to the observation chamber once more. This time, there was no agenda, no questioning. Just a single chair and a view of a nebula slowly unfurling in violet and orange across the viewport. "You have impacted morale," Nulo said after a long silence. Perrin leaned back. "That's usually either a compliment or a warning. They fear you less now. I wasn't trying to scare anyone. Yet you did. And then you didn't." That is a difficult transformation. Perrin watched a cluster of stars blink into view. "I didn't transform. I just got better." "Exactly." They sat quietly for a while, the glow of distant gas clouds casting soft shadows. Eventually, Nulo stood. "We have added a category to the ship's emergency response manual." Perrin looked over. "Let me guess. Terran anomalies?" Nulo nodded. "It reads, if the human exhibits distress, allow them to rest. Observe. Intervene only if they stop complaining." Perrin grinned. "That's probably the most accurate medical advice I've ever heard." Nulo left him with the stars. Perrin sat a while longer, watching the galaxy stretch and spin beyond the glass. He didn't feel like an anomaly. He felt like himself, tired, functional, and, for the first time since boarding the Korellian Sway, understood just enough not to be feared. It wasn't much, but it was enough.